Today is the 7th and last day of the 7-day December 83 retreat. We will read some selections from the Zen teaching of Huang as translated by John Blofeld. No matter how often one has heard it, is one listening to words, or can one see what these words refer to in oneself? When such seeing takes place, then words are not repetitive. But before starting with these selections, I want to discuss one question which is often, not often, but here and there brought up to me by people either with curiosity or longing or feeling of despair, and that's the question, what is Kensho? It's a word which I don't believe was known in this country 30 years ago. It's a Japanese word. If my memory is correct, the translation is seeing into nature. That's the meaning of the word. But since it has become known in this country through books and centers at which Zen is practiced, it has become the source of a panorama of emotions, ranging from highest exuberant ecstasy to deepest despair. The word. Seeing into nature is a happening, if one can call it that way. Remember always, the words are not the real thing. Is a happening in which there's hearing without awareness of a listener, of an evaluating listener, or seeing without a seer, without the awareness of there being a seer. There's a wholeness without the thought, now I'm whole. Such thoughts come afterwards. Thoughts used to describe it can be non-divisive if there is still this wholeness which is just trying to express itself in words. But the moment thought tries to make an experiencer out of this experience, someone who has had this, then trouble starts. Division has been accomplished again. Division into me, who has had this experience now of Kensho, and others who haven't. Other emotions connected with this word, this concept, this idea of Kensho, is wanting it. Somebody told me very innocently and honestly, if I go home and tell my friends I've had Kensho, they'll think a lot of me. They'll think, wow. And if one looks very honestly, one may feel that this is one of the prime motivations for wanting it. So others think, wow, it's not as simple as this most of the time, but this is there for a lot of people, at least in the beginning of this work. The concept of Kensho is the source of comparison among people. Has he had it? I haven't had it. He probably or she probably has had it. Why don't I? It can become the occasion for getting a garment of distinction for having had it, which is not unusual for the functioning of the human mind. It functions in absurdity. Can one have Kensho into this absurdity, seeing into it? So, no rise is given for distinction. At a moment of no division, no me and you, no listener and what he or she hears, and the sound to boot, at such a moment, there's no time. There's no place, no reason. There is no pride, because there is no one there. There's just the listening. Without knowing. If someone with whom one works asks some questions, these are not meant to assign grades, to pass or not to pass. They're asked because the mind so easily deceives itself, so easily builds a trap out of freedom, and then is caught in that. But such questions can also be asked by oneself. There's no one to pass anybody. Pass to what? One understands one koan, one works on another one. Or one may not want to work on any koan, one may want to sit to understand the koan of one's daily life, one's moment-to-moment life. The understanding of which is not guaranteed by any moment of Kensho. Nothing is guaranteed. This work is from moment to moment. It is as old and as young as the totality of life. Let's take it, there is a moment of no division, no me, you, no fragmentation, inside or out. And then later on a thought occurs, have I had Kensho or not? Was it true Kensho? Is it as good as somebody else's Kensho? And what happened? The mind is back in fragmentation. That is the very substance of division, confusion, comparison bringing it about. And then one may make the connection. This Kensho wasn't genuine because now I'm confused. The confusion is genuine, meaning thinking, trying to resolve or figure out through thinking what cannot be resolved through thinking. It can only be seen into as thought, the process of thought, with no judgment of being inferior, superior. All of this is our walls and cabinets behind which we hide. So can one leave the past alone and work here, listen, attend here, freshly? No matter what happened, yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, or last minute. It's a selection here in Huang Po, and she deals in his words with some of what was talked about. The questioner, who is his disciple, a scholar by profession, we take it from the introduction, Buddhist scholar, maybe scholar of other scriptures, it's not present to me right now, but he was a great admirer of Huang Po, wrote down a lot of things he said and asked him a lot of questions. Here he says, what is implied by seeing into the real nature? And Huang Po says that nature and your perception of it are one. You cannot use it to see something over and above itself. That nature and your hearing of it are one. You cannot use it to hear something over and above itself. If you form a concept of the true nature of anything as being visible or audible, you allow distinction to arise. Let me repeat that the perceived cannot perceive. Can there, I ask you, be a head attached to the crown of your head? I will give you an example to make my meaning clearer. Imagine some loose pearls in a bowl, some large globules and some small. During their formation, they did not say, now I am coming into being. No baby says that. Hooray, now I am born. That I is a learning process. I remember way back having friends who have little babies. I was a child myself. My mother would say, an enormous step has taken place in this child. It now says I. So from then on I thought an enormous thing takes place in the life of a child when it starts saying I. And I repeated that to other people as a gem of knowledge. It's true, there's an enormous step taken when there's this feeling of I versus the world, which may be pressing in on me. They did not say, now I'm coming into being, and when they begin to decay, they will not say, now I am decaying. This being so, why this talk of I see, I hear, I receive an intuition through enlightenment? It may be just a manner of speaking, you can say. Yeah, this is my habitual way of putting it. I can drop the I too. It's not important. To just drop the I and think with that there is no I is an illusion. Just to always refer just leave the I out, or this person or something, means nothing except one has acquired a new way of expressing oneself. And there may be an image going with it. I'm more selfless now. That has to be seen. If it isn't seen, it acts in division, causing division. Or I hear the Dharma, I stopped short here. I receive an intuition through enlightenment, or I hear the Dharma, the truth, from the lips of an enlightened one. I assure you, says Huang, that all things have been free from bondage since the very beginning. So why attempt to explain them? Why attempt to purify what has never been defiled? Therefore it is written, the Absolute is thusness. Thusness meaning this as it is. This as it is. This instant. Seen, perceived clearly. Therefore it is written, the Absolute is thusness. How can it be discussed? You people still conceive of mind as existing or not existing, as pure or defiled, as something to be studied in the way that one studies a piece of categorical knowledge, or as a concept. The man who perceives things always wants to identify them, to get a hold on them. Those who use their minds like eyes in this way are sure to suppose that progress is a matter of stages. If you're that kind of a person, you're as far from the truth as earth is from heaven. Why this talk of seeing into your own nature? Here's a selection on the performing of the 6 parameters. The 6 parameters are the 6 virtuous activities: practicing charity, practicing morality, practicing patience under affliction, practicing zealous application, right control of mind, and practicing the application of the highest wisdom. Huang says, as to performing these 6 parameters and vast numbers of similar practices, or gaining merits as countless as the sands of the Ganges, since you're fundamentally complete in every respect, you should not try to supplement that perfection by such meaningless practices. When there's occasion for them, perform them, and when the occasion is past, remain quiescent. What we usually do is think, I should perform some more. It felt so good. Because I was busy. One was busy with activity, with meritorious activity, which drowned out this gnawing fear of maybe there being nothing inside, or one being nothing, nobody special, in comparison to all these special people around me. If you are not absolutely convinced that the mind is the Buddha, Buddha meaning truth, awakened truth, and if you're attached to forms, practices, and meritorious performances, your way of thinking is false and quite incompatible with the way. The mind is the Buddha, and there are no other Buddhas or any other mind. It is bright and spotless as the void, having no form or appearance whatever. To make use of your minds to think conceptually is to leave the substance and attach yourself to form. The ever-existent Buddha is not a Buddha of form or of attachment. To practice the 6 parameters and a myriad similar practices with the intention of becoming a Buddha, thereby, is to advance by stages. But the ever-existing Buddha is not a Buddha of stages. only awaken to the one mind, and there's nothing whatsoever to be attained. This is the real Buddha. Here he says, when the people of the world hear it said that the Buddhas transmit the doctrine of the mind, they suppose that there's something to be attained or realized apart from mind, and thereupon they use mind to seek the truth, not knowing that mind and the object of their search are one. Mind cannot be used to seek something from mind, for then after passing of millions of eons, the day of success will not have dawned. Such a method is not to be compared with suddenly dropping conceptual thought, which is the fundamental truth. Suppose a warrior, forgetting that he was already wearing his pearl on his forehead, must have been the insignia of a warrior, have a pearl on the forehead, were to seek for it elsewhere. He could travel the whole world without finding it. But if someone who knew what was wrong were to point it out to him, the warrior would immediately realize the pearl had been there all the time. So if you students of the way are mistaken about your own real mind, you will consequently look for it elsewhere, indulging in various achievements and practices, and expecting to attain realization by such gradual practices. But even after eons of diligent searching, you will not be able to attain to the way. These methods cannot be compared to the sudden dropping of conceptual thought in the certain knowledge that there's nothing at all which has absolute existence, nothing on which to lay hold, nothing on which to rely, nothing in which to abide, nothing subjective or objective. It is by preventing the rise of conceptual thought that you will realize wisdom. And the prevention is not the application of willpower and control, but attention, seeing, awareness. Which is the collecting of energy in that awareness. When the warrior found his pearl, he merely discovered what had been hanging on his forehead all the time. And just as his finding of it had nothing to do with his efforts to discover it elsewhere. Here's the narration of a little episode that took place between Kensho, that's the name of the disciple, Kensho, and Huang. One day I brought a statue of the Buddha and said, kneeling respectfully before our master, begged him to bestow upon me a sacred honorific, meaning a name, a new name, which one may cherish if one participates in this practice of receiving new names, the idea or the hope being that with a new name a new being will dawn within one. But it is only a new name. Kensho, he cried. Yes, master. How is it that you still concern yourself with names? All I could do was to prostrate myself in silence. And there was another time when I offered our master a poem I had written. He took it in his hands, but soon sat down and pushed it away. My poem ran as follows. He was a poet also, a scholar poet. When his master bequeathed him mind intuition, he of great height, and with a pearl on his forehead, dwelt for 10 years by the river of Sichuan. Now, like a chalice borne by the waters, he has come to rest on the banks of the Chang. 1,000 disciples follow behind him with dragon mien glorious bearing bearing the fragrance of flowers from afar. These are aspirant Buddhas, yet desiring to serve him humbly as pupils. Who knows upon which the transmission will fall? 1,000 years ago. Do you understand? He asked. No, Master. But why don't you understand? Think a little. If things could be expressed like this with ink and paper, what would be the purpose of a sect like ours? In Buddhist legend, or whatever you want to call it, cosmology, or I don't know the proper word for it, the Buddha was preceded by infinite numbers of previous Buddhas, and one of the Buddhas was Dipamkara Buddha, with whom the Buddha, according to legend, worked and with whom he already attained an enlightenment. Now here, Pei Su asks, did Dipamkara Buddha attain his intuition of reality within a single 500-year period or not? Apparently there is a talk of that it being a good period of time in which to attain the intuition of reality. 500-year period or not. Did Dipamkara, this previous legendary Buddha, attain his intuition of reality within a single 500-year period or not? And Huang Po says there's no attaining it within such a period. You must never forget that this so-called attaining of intuition implies neither a withdrawal from daily life nor a search for enlightenment. You have just to understand that time periods have no real existence. Hence the attainment of the vital intuition occurs neither within nor without a 500-year period. The questioner says, is it not possible to attain the omniscience in which all the events of past, present, and future are known to us? You see what he wants. Omniscience of all the past, all the present, all the future, sort of. One hears some teachers talk about perfect view or all-encompassing view, and then the idea is, it means I could see everything. Sort of like science fiction movie, which is fascinating to think and to depict. It's a challenge to movie makers to depict that. And we love to see it. And Huang Po says there's absolutely nothing which can be attained. Questioner says, well, how long is a cycle of 500 yugas? And Huang Po says, one such period should be ample for you to become a liberated sage. For when Dipamkara Buddha attained his intuitive knowledge of the Dharma, there was not really a grain of anything attainable. Here at another time he asks, the scriptures teach that the fettering of passions and illusions produced during millions of kalpas is a sufficient means of obtaining truth. Fettering of passions and illusions produced during millions of kalpas is a sufficient means of obtaining truth. This is the idea of practicing self-control, self-mortification, controlling desire, vowing chastity and fasting, all of these methods and means which have been practiced. It's time immemorial by people on a spiritual quest. And there are states of mind induced by these quests. So here he says, sutras teach that the fettering of passions is a sufficient means of attaining truth, even without going through the stage of being monks. What does this mean? This Pei-su apparently was not a monk, he was a scholar. Maybe he was wondering, do I have to become a monk to attain this? And Huang Po says, if you practice means of attaining enlightenment for 3 myriad eons, but without losing your belief in something really attainable, you will still be as many eons from your goal as there are grains of sands in the Ganges. But if by a direct perception you grasp it in a flash, you will have reached the highest goal. Why? Because the belief that the truth can be obtained belongs to the doctrines of those sects which do not understand the truth. Yesterday, in the koan, or was it the day before yesterday, there was this action of the disciple using a hoe to look for the spiritual remains of his teacher, and the response of whatever his name was. What are you looking for? And he said, it is a way of gaining spiritual strength or something like that. And here's a section on relics. Again, a dialogue between Pei-su and Huang Po. Pei-su says, if the Buddha really dwells in matchless tranquility beyond the multiplicity of forms, how is it that his body yielded 84 pecks of relics? And Huang Po says, if you really think like that, you're confusing the transitory relics with the real. Questioner says, are there really such things as sariras? Sarira means Buddha relics. Are there really such things as Buddha relics? Or are they the Buddha's accumulated merits? Huang Po says, there are no such things, and they are not merits. And the questioner says, then why is it written, quote, the Buddha relics are ethereal and subtle, the golden ones are indestructible? What does your reverence say to that? Huang Po says, if you harbor such beliefs, why call yourself a student of Zen? Can you imagine bones in the void? The mind of all the Buddhas are one with a great void. What bones do you expect to find there? Bones, all our past history, how early we date back, evolution and stuff is all mostly through findings of bones. Something really amazing about bones, because they don't, decompose, except maybe in tropical climates, but in any kind of semi-dry or dry weather, bones live on forever. And that's why they have this spiritual symbolism attached to them. Something that's permanent, a bone. Pei-su persists. He says, but if I had actually seen some of these relics, what then? And Huang Po says, you would have seen the products of your own wrong thinking. To see a bone as a bone, there's nothing wrong with that. But what we attach to this bone is the product of wrong thinking, fantasy, wishes, hopes, belief, wanting to gain something from it for myself or my group, those I identify with. Does your reverence have any of those relics? Please let us see them. And Huang Po says a true relic would be hard to see. To find it, you would have to crush mighty Mount Sumeru to fine dust, using only your bare hands. Mighty Mount Sumeru, a huge mountain symbolizing the self. It's a good symbol. Stone piled upon stone. One on top of the other, and then some more on top. The Master said, only when your minds cease dwelling upon anything whatsoever will you come to an understanding of the true way of Zen. I may express it thus. The way of the Buddhas, or the way of truth, flourishes in a mind utterly freed from conceptual thought processes, while discrimination between this and that gives birth to a legion of demons. If one asks, is this freedom from conceptual thought processes forever or eternal? What is that? Other than a new conceptual thought process, and away from what is this instant. It's the functioning of the mind, in which we put all our trust, from which we take all of our identities. Being this or that, becoming this or that. He says giving birth to a legion of demons. One knows what he's talking about. Here he says, my advice to you is to rid yourself of all your previous ideas about studying mind or perceiving it. When you're rid of them, you will no longer lose yourself amid sophistries. Regard the process exactly as you would regard the shoveling of dung. Let's bear in mind that a lot of people who came to Zen teachers were scholars, because the studying of the sutras abounded. It was for a long time thought the way of attaining enlightenment, the studying of sutras, scriptures, or imposing regimens, practices, pious practices, or self-mortifying practices upon oneself. And Pei-Su says, but how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? And Huang Po says, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips. It's not eating grains. It's not eating, it's attending. As this, whatever you call it, goes on. that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other. Do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you. What is this prevention? It's not just a resolution to make. I'm not going to allow the events of my daily life to bind me. One must see the bondage. What is it that holds one bound? Which is all the thought processes, all the identities and the emotions they arouse throughout the body, mind. Once they are aroused, what are they? One doesn't try to get rid of them, label them, run scared from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone. The present is a fleeting moment, and the future is not yet to come. It may be useful to look into what creates past, present, and future. Whether the past is a reality or whether it is solely memory. Albeit with a tremendous momentum behind it, shaping our lives, which we think we are shaping with free will. What is free will? It is wanting something, and what we want comes out of the past, out of our past ideas of what's desirable. And the future? What is the future? If you look and listen, where is the future? Where is the past? But if you think about the future, the bomb's falling, you're scared. Thought produces the future. And fear of the future, or the excitement about the future, what it may bring me, also thought, and what it evokes throughout the body. There's a moment of just listening, attending. No attender, no one who needs to do that, or has to do that, or must do that, or practices that. Just attention. Where's the past or the future? It doesn't even come to mind. Just the breathing. What is that? If I don't call it breathing, what is it? Here he goes on. When you practice Zazen, sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. He doesn't say here, cut out all thoughts. But don't let it disturb you. Of course, at times it does disturb us. Maybe most of the time. Again, to be careful not to let sentences and admonishments like this become new standards by which we judge ourselves. Then we're not with what is, but think of how we should be, and there the dismay starts. Because we never are what we should be. We never are. What should be is fantasy. What are we? There's no fantasy, no image. Listen. If you think that's a dog, that's thought. If you think it's a distraction, that's thought, and that's the distraction. If you see it's a thought, then what is there? He says here, do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Ah, be diligent, be diligent. We'll stop here for today.